Let's talk to animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I am an animal intuitive and sensitive, also known as an animal communicator and Reiki master practitioner here at animallovelanguages.com. And that little chirp is my feathered sidekick. He's nearly 24. We may just share the same exact birth date, right? Of December 19th. Yeah, although you are a lot younger than I am. And he never misses an episode. Although right now he's feeling kind of nappish, so he's going to spend probably the rest of this episode on my knee. Here at Let's Talk to Animals, we are a podcast that first and foremost is about de-wooing and demystifying interspecies communication. What is it? How does it happen? Who can do it? What can we use it for? And how can we take what we learn from the animals in our lives and use it to improve their experiences of life? And so for our first two seasons, if you've been following along for a while, you've probably enjoyed hearing a multitude of personal stories about all of those topics and more. And for season 3, we're really delving kind of into a deeper aspect of animal communication, which is when an animal shares a need or an unmet need or a desire or a health issue or something else that's going on in their lives. What do we do with that information? What comes next? And so Ute Luppertz today is here with us. She is first and foremost an interspecies communicator, also a holistic pet health coach and wellness coach. She is a Reiki master practitioner. We share that in common. And she's also a pet end of life doula, which I find amazing. And you're also really involved, Ute, in chronic care for animals that, really maintaining quality of life. And I'm not going to attempt to explain everything that you do because that's what you're here for. But I do want to very much welcome you to the podcast. And as always, as I always do, and I kind of primed you for this before we hit record, I always want to invite our guests, our special guests, to open us up by sharing a little bit about your personal story.
Yeah.
How did you even come to this work and definitely develop the expansive approach that you have, which is so needed. And it's something that really takes I'd say a really, really strong heart and a strong spirit and a really sincere call for this work. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your story.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm so happy to be here. And so my story is not a story of a child who always loved animals and had animals. I didn't grow up with animals. I actually got bitten by a big dog as a child, which I thought I would never work with big dogs. And part of my work is with big dogs. This is just an interesting situation. And the background is that I used to work with special needs children. That's my human training, right? And then in my spiritual evolution, I started to do energy reading, energy work with humans. And then I had one of those pivotal moments in my life. Right? A friend of mine died at a young age, and another friend of mine suddenly had to leave the area. So there were like two situations that were really profound for me personally. And I kid you not, this death was really significant because she had a young child. So this wasn't just an old person dying. So, and I felt really a profound sense of loss. And this sounds corny, but it really happened. This is when someone literally knocked on my door, and I'm opening the door and she holds this little kitten in her hand and says, "Is this your cat?" And I'm like, no. But if you don't know where the kitten belongs, bring her back. So 10 minutes later, this was, I had just gotten all of these news. And 10 minutes later, this kitten showed up, and there is a long story behind it. I actually found out who was the original family, and it wasn't a good situation. And the short of it is I was able to negotiate that she could stay with me. And this was my Empress Moopy, the Black Empress of my house. So, and that's how so death was a catalyst for me. And then I received this divine gift. And it happened for me in a way that I always was like, yeah, animals, that's cool, right? And I was too busy doing other things. And then Moopy shows up, and she named herself, by the way. That name isn't in the dictionary. I think now it is, but it wasn't back then. And Moopy shows up, and I literally had an experience of an awakening, in the sense of that there was a window in my heart that was there, and I didn't know it was there, and it opened. And I'm like, I saw a much bigger world, right? And that then led to Moopy needed a boyfriend. So I got her a boyfriend. So I started working with cats. Her Moopy's boyfriend slash husband slash slave, my cat Marlo. Well, you know, she was the boss all
You got to
along.
say it. You just be
You
honest
know,
about
you
it.
gotta say it how it is. You know, cats were worshipped in ancient Egypt, and there's a reason for that. This is not just a myth, right? And so with the cats, I started doing special needs cat care because Marlo was a severely health compromised kitten, and nobody thought he would survive. And this was in the days when holistic nutrition, say raw food, and I'm not trying to sell this to people, if anybody listens
This
here,
is your story.
you
This is your
know,
story.
all of this was still, there was nothing out there. So I made my own cat food. I found a holistic veterinarian, all of this, right? And then he survived, and he was like so compromised that people believed he wouldn't make it. And I just thought I'd do everything I can. So that's how I learned about nutrition. And I knew already a lot about natural remedies. That's a hobby of mine, has been a hobby of mine for a long time. And then I collaborated with my veterinarian. I said, I have these ideas. And this was also the first time that I collaborated with another professional who was willing to listen to my thoughts, my intuition about what my cat needed, right? And this then led to me longing to take the cats on a leash to the park, but they weren't dogs, right? There are people in my area who take the cats on a leash to the park. My cats were like, no, thank you, Mom. We don't do that. And then I had another pivotal moment where I was guided to go to a dog shelter. And anybody who ever looked on my website will see the story about my dog, Shiva. And all along, you know, I did this holistic stuff. I did work with kids. I did the occasional reading for people. And when Shiva came, we really looked at human eyes. You know, when you saw the two of us together, we looked like different bodies, but the same face, sort of, even though I thought he was a lot more handsome than I could ever be. But, and people would say, Ute, you should do this. You should do animal communication. And I'm going like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. Right. Because I thought this is different, and there's a veil, and I have to kind of do magical things. I didn't. And then again, Shiva had a very interesting story, which is a longer story, which I'm writing a book about currently. But
Oh, how wonderful.
it's a very profound experience. And Shiva was my teacher for the intuitive work. The cats laid the ground, right? My bird came later. That's also another catalyst story for me. But when Shiva got very, very ill, and I was able to facilitate his death, it was very dramatic. It's what most people are terrified of. You know, you're in the ER, they're in the ICU. It was intense, and I managed to convince him to please come home. I wanted him to be here and die with us here at home physically. You know, when I use the term die, I don't think things are over, but I use terms that most people understand: death and dying, right? And I had all of these ideas about what I'm going to do when we have him here, and had the crystals out and all of this stuff and blah, blah, blah. And it was really, really amazing to serve him during his transition, right? And he was ready to release himself, right? And this, again, it sounds corny, but it's true. In this moment of his actual last breath, right? It was like this. I got a very clear assignment from my dog saying, you better get started with this work. And this work,
Okay.
hello, girlfriend. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this work is, you can do this. And and he described to me in great detail what his job description is. And I get chills just thinking about this. And he, so he showed me what he is going to do as a gatekeeper on the other side. I'm not one of these people who wants to pull them back in a reincarnation. If they decide to do it, great. But I'm not one of these people who say, oh God, Shiva, you're my life. And he was my soul dog, right? And so it was another physical death that catapulted me into the next phase of my evolution as a practitioner. Yeah. And then because I experienced this as such a profound release, I was doing what everybody else does. I was crying, I was sad. I'm human, right? I also really had this illuminated experience of what freedom is. Freedom from form, freedom from pain, right? I mean, the whole space, this happened here, right across from my computer in my house. And then I rolled up my sleeves, and I used to do, this rehab work for animals. I'm also a T-touch practitioner, and that's a lot of work with trauma and the nervous system. And then I felt like, yeah, the ideas that I had, the blockages, there are no blockages. I just needed a catalyst, and that is what my dog did for me. I want to say I was in the closet for a very long time. When you work with I work with rescue groups, rescue animals, dog people, shelters. And I thought and I felt really embarrassed to bring that in, because I was concerned that people look at me as a fruitcake, and I'm really a grounded person. So it took me a while, and I discovered that the dog shows, whatever pet fairs were that was actually not the right market for me. I thought if people go to these shows because they want to learn about this and that with cats and dogs, which is the main gig, there were also little parrot representatives, but that's a much smaller crowd.
Yeah.
Right. And then everybody was just, no, we rescue, we adopt, we know everything. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah. And
that's a tough one.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I really, there's a lot of stuff out there in general where people make statements, also in the intuitive world, where I feel much more cautious to make statements. I want to invite people to explore, if that makes sense.
It makes absolute sense to me. This is all about relationship. And I feel like it just, what you just said reminds me so much of the scene from the original Avatar movie, which I just adore. Of course, it's probably considered an old school movie by now. I hear there's a sequel, but where Jake, the guy that's come from Earth, and he's like kind of a military guy, and he's not a scientist like everybody else that's walking around in these avatar bodies, and he goes up to the tribal leader, and he's trying to convince them to teach him, and the wise woman, the elder of the community, says it's very hard to teach someone who already has a full cup. And he says, well, my cup's empty, just ask my boss. And so he gets the benefit of all this amazing knowledge because he's willing to show up and know nothing, and invite and say, I teach me. I want to, and I feel like that, whenever we enter into any conversation, regardless of species, and I love how you share that you and Shiva looked out through the same pairs of eyes. It doesn't really matter what costume which body. It's like, oh, today you can be the leopard and I'll be the sheep,
Right.
and it's like tomorrow I'll be the dog and you can be the human.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it just, when we show up to any conversation, if we're not in a space of wanting to listen, it's probably not going to be a very productive and very satisfying experience. And so I really admire and appreciate that approach, and also the sensitivity that you show to notice when people are walking around. How full is their cup? Do they want what I have to offer? I mean, that's a huge dilemma, I feel, especially since so many of our listeners are either, curious or aspiring or studying or new to the practice and kind of trying to find their place. And like, I have yet to meet anyone who's like, yeah, I just want to follow the leader. It's like, if you want to get involved in this work, it's still a little fringe, let's be honest. And we've got a long way to go, and so I feel like, if you're trying, hi, do you agree with me? Okay. Yeah, he says, I do. I'm very passionate about this topic. And so I feel like, that's something you've navigated with such delicacy and grace to be able to notice, okay, this pet fair thing going on over here. These people all seem to have really full to overflowing cups already. Obviously, I'm not needed. This is not where I'm. And I think it's so important to feel that, not just think it, but be like, oh, this just doesn't feel like there's no synchronicity. Nobody's listening over here. I want to get out of here. I want to go find someone that's interested in this stuff, that wants to talk about it and learn from each other. And so, and you've navigated that sometimes very dicey process very, very well, and have found, since so many of your significant benchmarks have revolved around the passage out of the body and that feeling of, okay, well, where is my relationship with this being now? Has it dissolved? Is it still present and intact? I love what you share about not necessarily wanting to, if this one goes, so for so many years, I've said to him, if you go, I go. And now I've had to kind of morph that and realize he's told me that he has come back to me. This is his third incarnation with me in this lifetime, which is just amazing. But it's like, I'm still going to want to go back and pull him right back by the tail feathers. So, we each come to this from a different perspective, right? We come rushing back to each other, but but that doesn't mean that that's necessary. And I have had clients who've said, I think that one was a handful. I think it's easier if he stays on my spirit team on the other side, So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you navigated that, because it feels like it feels like looking back now, your story, it fits together so well, but it had to feel a little chaotic in the moments it was happening. And you had to be able to tap into yourself and trust that there was some kind of a thread, or there was a guide that was leading you to put all of these pieces together. Because the work that you do is emotionally taxing. You have to,
not for me, actually.
Not for you. Okay. So maybe I should rephrase and say it's perceived to be.
Yes.
It's this fear factor thing. So
yes.
I'd love to hear more about that. Maybe just for our listeners' sake to kind of, you've mentioned a few things that you do, but maybe I don't know that everybody's even familiar with what a pet death doula is or does. So it'd be awesome to learn a little bit more about that as well, or how you perceive that.
Yeah. So let me just start by saying that my relationships with any animal that ever crossed my path are eternal. And this is not a belief. This is not that I want to convince people to join any New Age church. It is an actual experience that I have. Shiva has a particular job, and I can call him in anytime I want to, if I need to identify with the form that he used to be. Right? He is part of my DNA forever. And that's, and so it's just how it is, and I know that I have a whole wall here full of portraits of everybody who ever lived and died here. And it's not creepy. It's beautiful. They're my spirit guides in the house. Right? And some stay closer because they came to me very late in their life, and others are further away. And I don't feel the need to do anything with my personality structure in this physical body, right? And so when I started telling you about my biography a little bit, I was always fascinated by unusual people and also animals. And Shiva was very, had a lot of issues, so it was very beautiful. It was also very challenging. And I learned a lot of things that I didn't even know I would learn, right? And the short of it is that I don't know exactly how it happened, but that I felt like drawn in my own life to the seniors, to the ones that were discarded. So I've taken over the years I've taken in many animals that would have died otherwise. And we did like golden years makeover, and I had some very generous people donate at times because they saw there was someone who needed surgery and all of this stuff. And so in my personal life, I did a lot of animal hospice care. And the pet death doula thing is not really a thing that you find anywhere. We have, since I started this work, and this is animal communication / consulting. It's a blend. And many of my clients are animals that are frail, old, or terminally ill, and people are really, really committed. When I do sessions, I have found in my own practice that when I do sessions where people complain, my cat does this, my dog does that, my parrot bites me, or whatever it is, that is fine and dandy if they are open. I work with them, but I find when people come to me complaining, they often want to fix the animal and they don't want to look at what is it that I need to learn. We need to change things. We don't like pee-pee on the rug all the time. I don't either, right?
Right.
I find that people who have had a long relationship and understand the depth of the soul connection, they do everything. They also know the clock is ticking. The physical clock is ticking,
Yes.
right? And then I met someone, and she found me on the internet, and she said, she's a dog trainer. She works with also a population, there are euthanasias that aren't what I call the pretty deaths in shelters where animals are forgotten, abandoned, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, there is nothing out there. There is nothing out there. And that's when I designed a training, and this is not for the faint of heart, by the way.
Right.
And when I say I am a pet death doula I do very particular things. I do not expect my students to do the exact same thing. I just say, if you call yourself animal communicator, a pet hospice something, a pet death doula, you better really define what that is for you, and you can learn as you go. So in my case, for example, and I have many stories about this that are just amazing, I support the humans. I love people too, not just animals. I love people too. And I also know that when someone has a bad diagnosis, that is stressful, it's expensive. Your nervous system, your adrenals. I mean, hospice is noble, but also exhausting. And I often coach people to ask more informed questions. I tune, of course, in with the animal. And with the niche of the end of life, where we are conditioned to believe we have control. We are the ones to put them down, which I hate that word. I don't put anyone down. I have a partnership with my animals. They're not humans. They don't have credit cards, they don't make phone calls. There is a different intelligence. And it's a fine line to really tune in how do you want to cross over? What are your instincts dictating, because they kick in, right? So when someone wants to hide out in the bushes, that's instinctual behavior. And I encourage people to, unless that's really something everybody wants, maybe you retrieve them from out under the bushes. You know, for example, cats are notorious, some cats, you know, a lot more cats go missing. Yeah. Than dogs. And so for me, this is really supporting the person, touching in, tuning in with the animal. You know, a lot of animals that are ill and they're full functioning still, they're already previewing what's going on. And it is fearless for most of them. And then this whole arena around death, which is the great catalyst for all of us. You know, I tend to say that if I were to design a bumper sticker, right, I would say there are two big events in life, birth and death. Everything else is drama or entertainment. You know, it's a little flippant, but I mean, anybody who has ever given birth, you know, you can die during birth, by the way, right?
Absolutely.
Has experienced death. Anything and everything that is unprocessed gets flushed to the surface. And that's what I create a container for. Right? That's a container that is massive. And with our animal companions, it is not uncommon that they're actually more worried about us than about themselves, right? Or I get reports where animals say, we were in the, if they don't die at home, you know, which that can happen at home too, but say, we were at the vet, I was on the table, you were talking about me, and nobody told me what's going to happen. You know, and when I catch people before that, I suggest that they engage in a dialogue, and it can be verbal, it can be images. There are so many channels. It's not just all images or all this or all that, what you read in many books. We all have a multitude of access points, and so have animals, right? And then it is, of course, you know, when we are emotionally so attached, it's hard to discern what's my stuff and what's their stuff. And that's where I come in often and say, let's look at the bigger picture. Everything is valid. And when I do trainings with my students, and a lot of them are animal communicators or Reiki masters, or, you know, do some kind of spiritual modalities, I suggest to them to really hold that space, and you know, and space holding is the rarest of arts, where we do not tell people what they should do. I think that's really the wrong approach, no matter what. But where we invite people to discover things with their animals, where we invite people and ourselves, if we claim that we are ready to do this work, I encourage my students to look at what are your pain points. Where does it get glitchy for you emotionally? We all have those.
We all have them. You are so right.
No shame, no blame in that. So, for example, I often preview death with the animals. I journey with them. I preview procedures, surgeries with them. And I am not often, but on occasion in my area, if people want me to be present when a euthanasia is performed. And just a sidebar, this is not, I've also witnessed natural death. So, but the most common way of dying is what I call a scheduled death. Okay. So I just want to say that it's not, that's why I use the word euthanasia so often when I'm speaking.
Sure.
And so for me, I know I have that capacity to be present in a process like that. And I know people that I coach as animal communicators slash end of life doulas, they say I would not be able to do that. And I said, then don't.
Yeah.
It's not required. Don't do things just because, for you, this might be different, and I just walk step by step by step with the animal and the person, if that is the arena where we are working, and then there are also situations where, I want to give you one example of one of my all-time favorite cats. I call him the International Man of Mystery. His name is
That's very exotic.
Yes, his name is Tiwi. And I say international because he and his person live in London. I mean, he passed,
Okay.
And she initially heard about me and contacted me to tune in when he's supposed to be euthanized. And he had a very aggressive form of cancer,
Okay.
And then Tiwi goes like, I'm not done living yet. Hello. And his person was so amazing, and she still is. She has now another cat who was sent by him. Duh. But so Tiwi was like, I'm still having fun here, and she had a team of oncologists and other practitioners, and that was a little wonky. And I suggested to her, you could also shop for another team, for another oncologist. And it's one thing when I'm working with the end of life scenario where it might be, if you were to be my client, first thing I would say to you, or might ask you, Shannon, do you trust your veterinarian? Do you have a good relationship with your veterinarian?
That's a really valid question.
Right? Sometimes we don't have the luxury. We are in an emergency situation, and she switched, she went to a different clinic and they served her well. And also for anybody who listens who is an aspiring practitioner, her belief system around how to work with his illness was very different than what I would have done. I would have done things very differently. And I don't have a problem with that, as long as people are genuinely interested in serving their animal. And Tiwi is like, yeah, you can do things. I'm here for you, right? And she took all of these little videos where he was in the bed with her. And then what I ended up doing with him, so we had scheduled sessions, and I did like months of remote Reiki for him, and I do this where I do it here in my sphere, in my time zone, do it late at night. And I tell people you can be asleep. Different practitioners have different protocols on how to do that, but I tuned in with him, and then I sent her a Reiki report, and she goes like, Ute, you won't believe this. So basically the time was like the wee hours of the morning for them, for me, late hours of night over here, because he's dead asleep. And when I look at the timestamp of your email, without fail, when you start doing Reiki, he sits up and looks out the window and is in like Buddha meditation pose.
That is so cool.
And it ended up, he ended up living many more months. And I also want to caution those who listen, this is not a given that when we do beautiful things that they live longer. This is not selling prolonged life if you work with me. No. But it ended up being that he could really complete the cycle that he designed for himself. In the end, he requested to die naturally. And she just said, Ute, I cannot do it. I said, Tiwi is fine. He loves you so much. If you cannot wait it out, and it was really intense. He looked really bad at the end. He was like rocking it, he was rocking it. And so she ended up having someone come to our house to euthanize him. And he said, whatever you need, I do it out of love for you. And this is not what we would do, where we go like, yeah, I do it out of love for you. Oh. He's like, I love you so much. If you need to do this, do it. And this is one of the things where we are programmed as humans to say, oh, he's so miserable, or she, I need to do it for them. And some of that is the case, right? But make no mistake, it's a choice.
Well, it's just what I hear in your story is so much respect for adding the animal's voice to the conversation and allowing the animal to, if at all possible, have the final say about how and when, and to give input that would otherwise fall by the wayside of either codependency or over emotionality, or maybe a misplaced empathy. Our empathy channel is always open, but it's like, we may find that our views of death and what's tolerable and what's manageable is different from what our animal perceives. And, it feels like, especially in this modern age, there is a pain point around seeing death as just one more problem that should be fixable. And yet, and if we get to a point where there's a diagnosis and maybe we get a second or even third opinion and it's confirmed, this is not a fixable problem, then we want to move to the solution. And it's like, life is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be welcomed. And that sounds super cheesy. I'm full of them. So, stay tuned. But it really, the animals teach us about, it feels like, just being present with what's happening in our lives right now. Like, this is today's experience of life. Let's live it. And I mean, at any point, I love how you share, we've got to notice like where our triggers are, where our pain points are inside of us, because those are our limitations. And recognizing maybe I need to empty my cup, and ask my animal, what do you have to teach me about this? What do I not know yet? What would elevate our ability to keep company together, regardless of who's embodied and who's in spirit. So it's fascinating listening to your experiences working with animals, and and also taking a look at, well, what kind of support is in place for that human. I love how you say you love humans too, because I'll be honest, I've shared this on other podcasts. When I had many years, I founded and ran a charity for folks that were suffering with eating issues for 10 years. I worked with people in many capacities, another 10 years as a freelance writer. When I got to animal communication, I was like, awesome, finally, no more people, and because our species can be challenging sometimes, right? And so when I first enrolled in classes, and my first animal communication teacher explained that today we were going to learn how to tune in with the human, I was like, oh no, I didn't sign up for that. I'm out. And my poor partner was like, he was the one that, like, the other student I was partnering, he was like trying so hard to, like, keep me in the game. Like, well, why don't you just give it a try? Like, and I found it wasn't, not only was it not so bad, but it was like, it gave me access to this whole other beautiful side of being a human animal. Like, there's this whole softer side that we don't get to see unless we involve that person's unconditional love bond with their animal. And it's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, you just get to see this brave. I mean, sometimes you see the frailty, but it's like in the context of brave, because anybody who shows up for an honest and open conversation about death with any other being is fundamentally brave.
Yes.
That's like,
yes.
Regardless of where the outcome goes or what comes up, it's like, we've got to be pretty brave to just, what do you want? What do you need? And then looking at, for those human animals that can't wait or just feel like overwhelmed, it's like, okay, well, what kind of support might you need in order to hold space more effectively for your animal who's, it's like, because sometimes that person may just feel like, I don't have any support for this. I don't have any context for this. And, and so we have to kind of that's something that really fascinates me about our field too. Like, usually after we come through our training, whatever training we have in whatever various disciplines that we feel called to, we kind of, and you and I were chatting about it before, we hit record here, it can kind of feel like we're all out there as lone wolves. It's like, so, we can support one another as well,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's why I love that you've created a training, because there will be people who will be called to all different facets of this work and will not know where to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who
And
can
I love
mentor me,
collaboration. I love collaboration.
Yeah.
I love to refer people, to
Yeah.
this, that, or the other practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've kind of come to that point. This is like perfect. We've come to this point where I do want to invite you to kind of ask people, because, this is, I would say, and maybe, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I would say this is like, if not the number one reason why people seek out interspecies communication and extra support and complementary services, it's right up there in the top two, maybe, or two or three reasons why people would ever even open up that door in their life. I mean, even people that are like so skeptical or so scared that somebody that knows them is going to think they're so woo-woo, they're going to go there because of the love of this animal. And so, if somebody's listening to this and they are feeling drawn to this, like, and they want you to be their mentor, or they want to work with you, or they're just going through a really hard time with their animal, like, what would you recommend? Like, where do they start?
I mean, if they are curious about me, they can always start with a free consult, get to know each other, talk. And that applies to sessions that I do, hospice support sessions. It applies to the next workshop that is coming up, or whatever, right? Because I think we all have our own flavors, and then people get a feel for what it is, right? That would be the first step. And then I like to keep things open for my clients. I'm not trying to sell programs. With hospice, some people want a lot of what I call spot checks. So we chop up sessions because it really works for them. And others just have one session and then off they go. So I'm not trying to push a business model program on people. That is unethical to me personally. And if people want to sell programs, great. If that's resonating for them and it's in alignment for them, that's great. Right. I also, since I started the hospice workshops, death doula workshops, that was in 2017, you will find more trainings, there is a market emerging,
I do agree.
Right. And that's awesome. And I have people who went to this university or that training or this famous communicator who wrote books and blah, 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 blah. That's all great. I find that people who work with me are genuinely interested in self-discovery. Who am I in the context of this? How can I expand in the context of this? And it's such a high level of commitment also to the animals. When I do sessions, and the intuitive sessions I always do on the phone because it's distracting to look at people or their living room, things like that. And we start this dialogue, and then people go like, yeah, this resonates. And I had a session yesterday with a husband and wife team, which was really fun because they had very different temperaments. And she was convinced that she had it dialed in with her cat, and that the cat had emotional issues. And I said, to me, it feels like she is in a lot of pain. Right. And we very carefully dissected this because I didn't want to alienate her. And I just said, I feel when I palpate her energy, if she were my cat, I would really want to find out about this and that area in her body. Yeah. And she's like, oh, and then he was the one actually who picked up on this. Right. But when this happened, the cat was really stressed in the beginning of the session because there was a lot of emotional energy from the person. And then I said to her, now look at your cat. She could relax because now we are meeting her. And she's like, yeah, she started purring, and I'm like, yeah, this is like,
Yeah.
like when Pearl shows up, because Pearl is not just for the intro. Pearl also vets the people you're working with. Let's just, so he isn't just, oh, I'm Shannon's bird, hello. He's not just, he would give you signals if he didn't approve of me.
This is so true.
Right?
I do a monthly, I have an intuitive business coach that I've been working with for a few years, and she has a kitten named Pearl. And of course I have a parrot named Pearl, and they're both gray and white. And it's really funny. She always knows when, if I come to a call and I'm really in my head, or I'm in my stuff, or I'm just, being hard on myself, because Pearl is obnoxious. And he screeches and he bites me. She says, I can always tell when you're in a good space, because we don't have any interference on the high treble channel, right? So I love that, because there is such a sensitivity. And I also feel, and you said something earlier, and I'm going to bungle it, I'm sure, trying to paraphrase, but something, or maybe it was something I read on your website about how critical the Reiki energy is in kind of facilitating some of the sensitivity needed to navigate different personalities, because we come into an interspecies family, and there are different perspectives, and there are different energy levels. And, we're kind of, in a way, we're kind of delicately tiptoeing across landmines we have no way of knowing are there. And when it's something like death or illness or pain, it's, we're kind of guaranteed. It's almost like we just push buttons without even knowing we're doing it, because of the people's. So it feels like, and I agree with you. I've interviewed a few communicators who do work as death doulas, end of life hospice. And there are so many ways to approach it. And I think what you said that's so valuable for anybody who's listening today is, if you've had any kind of experience or course or a program that you've gone to, and maybe you take away one valuable thing, but it didn't really meet your needs. I mean, I don't even know how many teachers I've studied with. I want to study with every single communicator and practitioner that I interview. I'm not going to lie. If there were 10 of me, we'd be studying constantly. And so, there's always room for continuing education. And you may find that this is all part of your evolution in this field, in this community that we all represent, is finding what works for you.
Yeah.
If a big box program works for you and you just need a little structure and you're off and running, fabulous. If you need and really respond well to one-on-one mentoring, fabulous. Just know that there is somebody out there who can meet that need, and your job is to intend it and to stay open. Now, and if that resonates with you, maybe Ute's, your highly individualized approach is absolutely perfect. We have a whole on animallovelanguages.com/podcast. You can find an amazing repository of personal stories, different practitioners, and you can just start listening and notice what resonates. You may not know yet what feels right to you. And not only is that okay, but it's actually kind of exciting, because that means, it's like I love one of my intuitive teachers, longtime intuitive mentor, Sonia Choquette, talks about, she says her mother always said, never assume you know anyone, including yourself.
Yes.
First and foremost, we need to uncover, who is this human animal residing inside my skin?
Yes.
And the more we unpack that, and especially around these two vital, like you said, Ute, the vitally impactful experiences that we all share in common, birth and death. Like, if that isn't proof that we're more alike than different, I don't know what is.
Right. Yeah.
So the more we can kind of, in fact, so often I feel like, with my human clients whose animals are in some stage of their transition back or forth across the veil, this is the invitation to that human animal to maybe get a little more comfortable, maybe get a little more connected to their own process and their own journey. Maybe it's the an invitation to maybe dial down the fear factor just a little bit and amp up the trust, I'm struggling to find the words, that this too shall unfold in a way that's ultimately loving and kind. That's that would be my wish anyway, and my intention for my own death and for all of us.
Yeah. The way I approach it is that I acknowledge that everything has a place at the table. So I don't, if you came to me or anybody very fearful, I wouldn't try to coach you to snap out of it. I would say it is not good or bad, it is. So for me, when we can acknowledge everything without saying this is good, this is bad, right?
Yeah.
Then it is much easier to not throw that energy onto someone else or project it onto someone else. And this is genuine, I have a lot of compassion for people and for myself also when I don't have it together, right?
We all have our moments, right?
Yeah. So when someone says, oh, I shouldn't cry, this is one of my favorites. I shouldn't cry when and I'm like, why? They know you're sad. So say express sadness. There are two things. I throw it onto you, Shannon, right? Or I own it.
Yeah.
And I feel my vulnerability, right? And that's a thing also, that fake, like, it's okay. People come to me and say, tell my dog it's okay. And I say, is it? Is it really okay? If you lie to them, they know it. This is like,
you must be honest,
right? It's okay to say, I'm sad, as long as we don't expect them to be our social workers, right? So for me, it takes also a lot of courage to feel everything, to feel the abyss of love, and grief and whatever else there is the other side of it, the other side of the coin, right? And when we can allow that, it takes the stress out of our system. And the animals don't go like, you're telling me stuff and it doesn't resonate. Can I share one more story? Do we have time for that?
We have time for one more story. Sure, we do.
Is that okay? So it's a really powerful one, So many years ago, someone contacted me with an ancient little dog, like going on 20 and like a laundry list. And the dog was like very, very, very ill. And she took excellent care of her dog physically, right? And then she says, I don't understand. I told her all the time, please let go, please let go. So it was very charged for her, and the dog was almost 20, which is really old. Little Dachshund. I mean, super old and super like body was not together anymore.
Okay.
So, and she was very emotional and I understood that very well. And then she says, I keep telling her, it's okay. You're going to break mama's heart, but it's okay. Please go. You're going to break, and I'm like, and I'm tuning in with the dog. And her dog goes like, I cannot die. I cannot die because I am going to break her heart. How can I die? And we say those things without thinking, really. And then I talked to her and I said, this is why this is dragging out. You tell her to let go and you tell her, it's okay, you're going to break my heart. And she is taking it literally. And she goes like, oh, I mean, it was a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
It was a light bulb moment.
And those the privileged moments that we share with our human clients, where I come away every time amazed by how bravely other human animals show us their vulnerabilities and the areas where they need to learn. It's like I then come away and go, okay, you know, that sets that sets the bar even higher. So it's just amazing. It's just amazing how much I often share that this work, when I started, I felt like I was, you know, a spaceship with all these little bells and whistles that I had never bothered to flip the switch. And like all of a sudden, all of this cool stuff started happening. And I was like, dude, I did not know that was possible. And so that, you know, if that isn't a reason to either, you know, schedule your first session or check out a workshop or a course or a seminar or read a book or just listen to some more podcasts, I don't know what is. It's awakening. You know, we're all intuitive. This is a channel we all share in common. I really feel as this podcast has unfolded, that's one of the reasons the animals asked me and named it Let's Talk to Animals, because that's what they want. And if you're, you know, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, you know, there's so many communicators now, the market is glutted. It's like, no. Every animal, if every animal on the planet wanted to line up and wait to have their turn to have a conversation with a human, there would be folks that would be waiting a very, very, very long time. So you're needed. Like if you're even at all interested on any level having these experiences, then you are needed. So I just want to issue that invitation. There is a community. You are a part of it. You are very wanted and needed, and chances are very good you are already receiving some information from your animals or from the animals that you care for or work with or love, or even the wild animals. I've met folks that just, they really have a heart for wild animals and really feel such a kinship, and they have even been involved in helping wild animals that maybe have gotten injured or hungry or lack water. And so just pay attention. Just as you listen, this has been a wonderful conversation today with you, Ute. I really am so grateful for your time and the work that you do and your honesty and sharing from your heart. And, you know, I encourage you to re-listen to today's episode and just sit with your own heart for animals and ask the animals, how may I serve you? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ask them, how may I serve you? And don't push. Imagine your cup empty and waiting, and it will fill. It will fill. You will receive information. You will receive guidance. So, Ute, thank you again. I usually do this at the beginning, and I did not. I will put it in the show notes, but your website is pets-point-of-view.com. And so if you want to visit with Ute, if you want to book a free discovery call, if you want to enroll in any of the workshops or have a consultation, this is the way to do it. And of course, you can reach myself and more importantly, Pearl and my menagerie at animallovelanguages.com. We're always delighted to hear from you. He says, I've got lots of cute parrot pictures I can send you. Right, we're doing parrotpinups.com is our next website.
Yes.
Anyway,
Parrot Centerfold for 2022.
Exactly. We're waiting for Parrot GQ to call any day. You're already tuxedoed and ready, aren't you? Mm-hmm. And I believe Miss Ute has a ladybird who might be interested. So.
Match. Yeah.
Parrotmatch.com. There you go. Oh my God, I love it. Ute, it's been a joy to talk with you today, and look forward to keeping in touch and hearing more about your adventures here, there, and everywhere. So yeah, such a joy. And stay tuned. Those of you who are new to Let's Talk to Animals, thank you for choosing us. And stay tuned. We offer a new fresh episode every week. They come out on Wednesday mornings, and just a wealth of stories, inspiration to start or end your day, and lots of talk about all of the animals we love so much. So stay tuned and see you next week, and bye for now.